Hello, I am Henry Crawford, and welcome to Poets versus the Pandemic, a series devoted to poets whose books have come out during this time of coronavirus and sheltering in place. This is our first PvP program of the year, and I want to thank all of the poets who appeared last year and helped to brighten our lives during this pandemic. Tonight, we are featuring poet Anne Harding Woodworth, who will be reading from her new book, Trouble. We'll also be hearing from guest poets Hayes Davis and Hiram LaRue. Before we begin, I want to thank the WordWorks and Cafe Muse for helping sponsor this series, and I want to thank everyone here for joining us tonight. Okay, so let's get started. First, and most importantly, we want you to purchase the poets' books. So I will put a link into the chat that will take you to the places where you can purchase those books, the books of each one of our poets tonight. We also have a donation button on that page, so don't feel shy about donating to our program. We at WordWorks and Cafe Muse will thank you wholeheartedly. I will also put into the chat a link where you can follow all of our WordWorks online readings, sign up on the registration form, and you'll be on our mailing list to get Zoom links for all of our readings. Now, if you want to ask a question of our poets, feel free to drop a question into the chat, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we have time. A couple more things. Please join us on Monday, February 1, 2021, when Cafe Muse Online will present featured poets Lindsay Lusby and Charlotte Matthews. And we'll be back here again with PvP on February 17, 2021, with Maryland Poet Laureate Grace Cavalieri, reading from her new book, What the Psychic Said. So let me introduce my good friend, poet Anne Harding Woodworth. She's a poet and a playwright, and the author of 7 books of poetry. Her 7th, Trouble, just came out in the fall of 2020. She also has 4 chapbooks, and an excerpt from her chapbook, The Last Gun, won a COG Poetry Award and was subsequently animated as a multimedia work. Her one-woman play in verse, Hannah Alive, the original poetry of which is included in Trouble, was a finalist at the Adirondack Shakespeare Company Festival. Woodworth has collaborated with her sister, Bundy H. Boyd, on the play Somewhere Voices, which was performed on Zoom. So she's no stranger to Zoom and no stranger to PvP. So let's give a warm welcome to Anne Harding Woodworth.
Thank you, Henry. That's very nice of you, and it's great to see all these faces. Some I recognize and some I don't, but welcome to this wonderful series that Cafe Muse has put on, Poets versus the Pandemic. I'm going to start with a poem from a previous book, from Unattached Mail, with this guy with the roses on his head. And I'm doing that. I'm going to read from an earlier book right now, mainly because it's going to set the stage for another poem I'm going to read from my new book, Trouble. I love to sing. I'm in the City Choir of Washington, and music very, very often works its way into my poems. This poem that I'm going to read is based on the song Papillon di Seta Blu. It's an Italian song, very old, very popular in Italy. And it's about a man in Paris he's wearing tails. He's got a blue necktie, one of those blue bow tie, a blue bow tie at his neck. And and he's walking along the Seine. And the first verse is very beautiful about midnight in Paris. And then each verse, you can see that this man is quite depressed and he's thinking of throwing himself into the river. So I'm going to start with my poem called Papillon di Seta Blu, and it's based on the song. I sing of him, nameless Italian, in a sleeping Paris full of moon and fading carriages at midnight. Elegant foreigner in tails and cufflinks, he is luxurious promise, the hopeful of a first verse. And I sing it Sing and sing it because song never browns the lapel's gardenia of a first verse. So when he says, bon nuit, buonanotte to the lamps and to a cat, I sing the first verse again, and his farewells remain unsaid. Dapper man along the Seine, top hat on his head, and I sing it, sing it, sing it, because first verse lightnesses turn back the hands of a pocket watch. So when at dawn, the top hat and gardenia float under the bridge, and I sing the first verse again, nothing has gone into the river, nothing cold and violent as the city comes to life. The stranger stands there still, crystal cane in his hands, bow tie of blue silk against his white vest. And his exile goes unsung because song sings the way we would have it sing. Now let's look at trouble. Thank you. This is my trouble book. And it's, the first part of this book is a persona poem of 28 poems. It's a cycle of 28 poems. It's called Hannah Alive. Henry mentioned that in the beginning. I turned it into a play, but this is the poetry that the play came from. And Hannah Hyatt O'Reilly is a widow. Her husband, Tony, has died several years ago. She is a sculptor. She makes these beautiful little things that she calls sticks. They're really just human form in very thin humans that she places all over her house. She lives alone with her dog, Max, and she's on her way to being 80 years old. She has a feeling that her sons are going to put her into a nursing home. And so she contemplates how she might end it all before that happens. It's a coincidence that her initials are, well, Hannah Hyatt O'Reilly, her initials are H2O, and she loves water and does a lot of swimming. And also remember, Hannah is just the name Hannah, H-A-N-N-A-H, is a palindrome. I'm going to read a section of the poems, number 24 through 27, in which Hannah considers death by drowning. I love this song. È giunta mezzanotte, si spengono I rumori, si spegne anche l'insegna di quell'ultimo caffè. A Parisian in tails, late at night, walks along the Seine. It could have been Rome, but it wasn't. The words are Italian, but the scene is Paris. And by the last verse, the man's hat is floating on the river. So is the gardenia that was in his lapel. He's gone. That's why I sing only the first verse. Till now, that is. I thought it was better to stay with the first verse of tragedy than to get to the end. But now I wonder, was it really tragic? Maybe he was just an old Parisian, an old person like me. He dressed for the occasion, knew what he was going to do. 25. There's a bridge not too far from here. It's a big old steel construction with struts and trusses, rivets and girders. I don't know if I'd be able to climb the railing. Boats go back and forth beneath it, not big ones, but it's a busy river. Tony had a friend whose father had made some terrible error at work, cost the company millions, and so he jumped from a bridge into a New York City river. Don't know which one, but it seems he couldn't do anything right. He landed on a sailor in a scow and killed the poor guy. How can we ever be certain of not hurting another person? 26. Recently in the outdoor city pool, I tried to suck water into my body, through my nose and into my lungs. I didn't put rocks down my bathing suit or do anything Virginia Woolf-like. No real drama, just practice though. There was Something familiar about it, water to water, beginning and end, full circle. A palindrome like my name, Hannah. Hannah Hyatt O'Reilly, H2O. Well, a sniff is all it took, and I felt the liquid enter my nose, causing me to almost smell something under my brow. Or was it pain? I coughed chlorine. My sounds shot up, staccato, pizzicato, with splash and panic. My arms flailed and I swam over poolside where a skimmer bobbed, sucking up the litter of a city's summer. A lifeguard from her tall chair looked down at me and called out. I couldn't hear what she said, though by then I'd stopped sputtering, having learned what desperation mixed with instinct underwater would make me do. Thrust myself up from the deep, the way a newborn pushes out from its mother in an urgency of abandoning water for oxygen. I'm not trying to be born. 27, I'm not trying to be reborn either. But let's say I actually die. I signed a paper years ago, signed myself right into the word cremation. See how the M has inserted itself into creation? Take it out and I could start all over again. But would I? I was a third girl. They wanted a boy. I came during the World Series and they left me in the hospital nursery while they listened to the game on the radio. No, if I were to create myself again, I'd start out later than that, older. Like I wouldn't mind a romp in bed with someone good at it like Tony, someone who'd bring me gardenias and tell me I smelled of Tahiti. I wouldn't mind holding a newborn again, without the fatigue, the mastitis, the weight gain. I wouldn't mind finding an art earlier, but I'd skip the middle time when the kids have their own cars and seldom utter any words. And then all of a sudden, they're living with someone, doing their own creating, going to baby showers, parent-teacher conferences, and graduations. All the while, the M is encroaching fast like a comet arcing. It inserts itself into creation effortlessly, laying the kindling, wadding up the news, and striking the match. Thank you. That's Hannah. She became a real friend. I mean, I think of her as a living being. Let's go now to England, to Stonehenge, where, well, I'm sure some of you have visited there and some of you have seen pictures of it. It's a beautiful stone circle, but outside the circle, there's something called the heel stone. And if ever there were a metaphor for an outlier, the heel stone is it. There's a story about the heel stone that says that on the longest day of the year at sunrise, the shadow of the heel stone goes right into the circle. And they say that that is Father Sky fertilizing Mother Earth. So this is the heel stone. To be an outlier is to be the heel stone, unable to enter the circle, aging, eroding, corroding, and gradually, imperceptibly, leaning in all weathers and seasons on that breathtaking plane. Listing like that, it's as if melancholy has taken him by the shoulders. But it's not sad to be on the outside, at least most of the time. He knows that the upright stones in the circle will never make room for him, try as he might to enter. Isolation makes him contemplative, makes him aware, makes him stand tall unabashedly for inclusion and love, makes him look around at all the good things on the plain, makes him eager for the sunrise of the longest day, when his shadow will penetrate the circle, even if he can't. Thank you. Now, I'm going to read a short series of 4 poems that are based on letters written by a man named Sig who went to Harvard. And while these letters came to a lawyer and who was a good friend from high school of his. But at Harvard, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and he had to leave. And he had a life of wandering and sometimes institutionalization and sometimes incarceration. I call the whole cycle the Sig poems in memory of Sigmund S. Sig's cars. Police cars sentenced me to damnation in Colorado. Police gun cars threw me into the hospital. 2 cops tore my arms out across the front of a police car and broke both my shoulders, downstream and no shoes. Corporations work through police cars. Time magazine hunts cars. Time advertises what they will hunt. Many days they followed my car. I was 5 cars stolen. I have no car. I walked to serious leg and eye consequences. They hunted me all around Oakland, California. Department radios posted everywhere. That's him. From the speed of cars and telephones, I know there's something beyond us. Sig talks himself into a brawl and the police come. Listen, listen, Sig, listen to me, Tristan, to the voices, choices, and in Arkansas I saw. Now do it, hit the guy who's looking at you. Hit him, Sig, take me, siren, beauty dame. Your song is playing in my head. Siren lures me, cures me, blurs me. I forget my S's, inanity. Sigmund, who named me Sigmund? I forget my S's. I am Igmund. I get one phone call, that's all. Sig's injuries. The story of my beatings by police is thin and bandaged. I was no names. At school, we were good times. Touch football, squadron, good sport. I was no names. Now my head is kicked in. I won't ski again. Terrible end to a literary beginning at school. I went to mother in a house, in a room, in a shelter, with contusions, injuries, thin and bandaged, head kicked in, good sport. I was no names. Sig's letter to his old friend, the lawyer. Good days to you and legal world. Boarded Greyhound in Houston. Not a good letter. In 2 days, I was in the trees on a side road in Arkansas. Police revolver behind my head. Me in the trees. Scarce legal help. Not a good letter. Can't write it all down, and too much of it is screamed. My back is ruined, neck broken, brain shot full of bone and cartilage. Black shirts drove me to the morgue. Not dead. Not a good letter. All the best to you in Legal City. So as I did with the Sig poems, I do it often. I like to take phrases out of other people's writing and reconfigure them into my own poems. This led me to do something, to write something which I call convolutes. I did a whole series of convolutes, 24 poems based on 2 years worth of Cosmopolitan magazine. And you can read about that process if you want in an article about it in Women and Language that was published last spring. I'm going to read a convolute tonight that incorporates lines and phrases from the New York Times, the BBC, And it's about as well as from a website called space.com. It's about a human trafficking crime that some of you will probably remember in 2017, where a tractor trailer truck was found in a Walmart parking lot with 8 dead immigrants in it, suffering from dehydration and heat. At the same time that happened, I found an article in space.com that said there was water on the moon. And I just thought, that the water that these people need is as far away as the moon. So this is a convolute called Water on the Moon. Walmart parking lot, at least 8 bodies in a tractor trailer, at least 38 people in the back of the trailer, believed to be suffering heat stroke or dehydration, asking for water, trace amounts of water, deep within the moon's wet interior, asking for water, deep within the trailer truck. At least 20 in critical condition, 7 hospitals, others of less severity, believed to be asking for water, ice in shadowed regions at the lunar poles, water that you can get on the moon instead of bringing with you. At least 8 bodies, including 2 children. Heart rates over 130 beats per minute, very hot to touch, energy emitted by the moon's hot surface, asking for water, bodies including 2 children, no signs of water inside, no signs of trapped water, ice, footage of vehicles arriving to pick up some survivors. Others on foot may have managed to escape into the woods nearby, believed to be asking for water in a shadowed region. And along the same lines of, I'm going to read a skinny. And a skinny is a poem invented by one of our DC poets, Truth Thomas, who is a poet, musician, and a literary activist. And this skinny is, the rule for a skinny is there are 11 lines in each skinny. The first line and the last line are repetitious in some way. And then the other 9 lines are just 1 line each. And 3 of those words are repeated. So I put 3 skinnies together to write this, and I think you'll remember the photograph that it's based on of the father and daughter lying face down in the Rio Grande as they tried to cross the border. Birds keep no borders. For June, 3 skinnies for June 23rd, 2019, the Rio Grande. Father and daughter drowned, face down, river separating families, face down, languages, nations, love, face down, daughter and father drowned. Birds keep no borders. Freedom resides in bird song. Freedom from cages limiting freedom. No borders keep birds. Daughter and father sing. Fly across border rivers. Fly your song home. Fly, sing, father and daughter. And on this happy day for me, very happy day for the inauguration, I thought I'd read a poem that, it's a brand new poem, and I love to write about soccer. I'm a big enthusiast, and a lot of my poems tend to be about soccer. This one is called At the Stadium, because I think a stadium can very often be a metaphor for all of life. And this is called at the stadium. We will go to the stadium, that place of law and ritual. We will climb to our seats at any time in any weather. We will not be terrorized by darkness or rain. If the sun has set, light will rise slowly in gas-filled globes until there is not a secret left unexposed, not a hint of a trigger or a lie. We will eat nachos and drink beer. We will raise our voices. We will stand, we will sit, and you, stranger, we will shake your hand and hold it a second longer than you expect. But you will not object. Come sit with us. Have a drink with us. Wear a scarf of any color. Color is just a word. Any color suits you and your language. We will clap our hands as the name of each team member is called out, and we will listen carefully to announcements coming from a loudspeaker. Stand with us for the wave, all of us together, laughing, calling out, loving the synchronicity that happens in a stadium. Thank you very much for for coming tonight and being here. And I don't know, I just feel really good about what happened today.
Thank you so much, Anne. What a wonderful series of poems, and thank you. Okay, well, one of the delights of being a Cafe Muse co-host is working with and meeting so many working poets. I first heard Hayes Davis read at Cafe Muse several years ago, and I was just blown away. And so I'm very, very grateful to have him here on Poets versus the Pandemic. Hayes Davis has won an Academy of American Poets Prize, and his work has been published in Gathering Ground, a reader celebrating Cave Canem's first decade, Bum's Rush, The Page, a deaf poetry jam, and The Black Notebooks. He's a former breadloaf working scholar and a founding member of Cave Canem, a workshop and retreat for African American poets. His first collection of poems is the very highly regarded Let Our Eyes Linger. He's a wonderful poet and a fine reader. So let's bring Hayes Davis to the PVP Zoom stage. Hayes?
Thank you so much, Henry. Thank you all for being here. What a day. And thank you for your work. I love the voices that you're bringing to life in your poems. I like the way that your work does what poetry does, which is to slow the world down, to look at those little moments and savor them. I'm going to read. I was trying to figure out what to read, right? Because you know, I want to read poems about hope. I want to read poems about things that are new. And then it occurred to me as I was getting ready. I said, wait a minute. We just inaugurated, I don't know how many other presidents have stuttered, but Joe Biden is a stutterer. And there's a wonderful video of him with a young boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, and he talks to him, and he's wonderfully reassuring in that way that older stutterers can be to younger stutterers. And so I'm going to read a few poems for a new president. A couple about me, a couple about some other famous stutterers. So this first one is from my book, Let Our Eyes Linger, which you can see in the background here. And it's called Etiquette. I am 8, sitting at my grandmother's kitchen table, trying to ask to be excused. My cousins, Jennifer and Danielle, watch my open mouth, keep sounding out, "Can I be excused?" like I don't understand what I'm supposed to say. They don't know that "can" is a word I sometimes can't say, like hello when I answer the phone, good night when my dad leaves the room, my name when people ask it. They don't know that when my teacher's eyes search the class for an answer, even if I know it, I look down. They don't know that my consonants fly away sometimes like birds when it gets too cold. I stare back at Danielle's mouth, Jennifer's mouth, Oma's mouth, trying to figure out what makes talking so easy for them. Maybe my stutter will go away when I get older. People on the bus, at the supermarket, in the candy store always tell me about their cousins and sisters and brothers older than me who once stuttered like me. They've outgrown theirs, and I hope mine will disappear one day too, so I won't miss so many cartoons after lunch. I began a series as I was at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, which is a wonderful uh, retreat in that is opening back up. So one of those signs of hope of COVID, the retreats are coming back. I know I have missed retreats. And my wife Terry Cross Davis, whose book a more Perfect Union comes out next month. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. And I believe, Henry, she's on the Cafe Muse season. She'll be reading for Cafe Muse coming up soon. So I started this series of poems in the voice of my stutter. I was reading another Persona poem series by Patricia Smith about Hurricane Katrina. She turned a hurricane into a persona for some poems. And so I thought, hey, why don't I try this with my stutter? So this is, I'll read the first one. Nemesis rhymes with Genesis. My stutter speaks part 1. I've lived as long as you could try to speak. These are prose poems, by the way. I've lived as long as you could try to speak. Before you knew my name, I clotted your throat, caught words in the space between your tongue and the roof of your mouth, or between your lips, or let them through peppered with extra syllables, stretched onsets. I even took your name, made people wonder how a child would not know what his parents call him. I laughed when adults told you, an 8-year-old boy, to slow down, take a breath, calm down, as I rode language from your brain to your mouth, pulled it up short, watched year by year as my presence thinned the herd, watched you choose the fewest words to give your thoughts voice. And when you swallowed those, I listened to teachers, your brothers, your parents, tell you to think about what you wanted to say. I follow you everywhere, picking consonants to trip you piecemeal, changing my mind after a week, a month, keeping some hard onsets around like dear friends. You do not know when you learned the words stutter, stammer, impediment, but I took what I wanted even after you learned that whoever named me had a wicked sense of humor. Who else would create from me a word the afflicted could barely say? And I'll say that I have never heard a stutterer who didn't stutter on the word stutter. So kind of one of those cosmic ironies out there. Just a brief one, because our president comes from Wilmington and because I had this experience in 30th Street Station in Philadelphia. Train ticket, my stutter speaks part 5. You think you're slick, writing Wilmington, Delaware, sliding the small scrap of written voice across the cold marble counter you can barely see over, trying to keep me behind your closed mouth until you have to talk to your cool, ultra-fluent older brother, already trying to guess what he will ask you first, practice a response. Wait until the smiling woman asks you if you want one way or round trip. And I didn't want to make this voice entirely antagonistic because I am who I am because I stutter. I have gotten to my 48th year and I still have a voice. I teach high school English, right? So I talk for a living. And so this one is called Mutualism. My stutter speaks part 7. And just a quick, you'll hear some relationships in nature that I mentioned in the poem that are symbiotic. Mutualism. If you have breathed consciousness into me through poetry, then we must be symbiotic. Plover bird to crocodiles, ants to acacia tree, bees to stamens and their pollen. No parasitism here. I take nothing that you do not give me. express myself only to fill your various silences and false beginnings. In middle school Septembers, you confessed me to teachers, hoping they would let us sit quiet and unjudged by your classmates. As a teacher yourself, you have welcomed my brethren in a handful of your students, watched parent proud as they raised hands more than you ever dared, waited patiently while my relatives expressed themselves. But now here I am on paper, proverbial grist for, well, I don't have to tell you. Have you made peace with me now that you talk in the classroom for a living? Now that people greet these confessions with disbelief? And so I chose as one of my subjects James Earl Jones, who you may or may not know stuttered from the time he was 6 until he was 14. And it was a high school teacher who um, forced him to read a poem that he had written. And I don't know if the teacher didn't think he wrote it. I don't know if I'm not sure, right, exactly how the story goes, but I know, or what the teacher's motivations were. But I know that when he read that poem, he suddenly found a voice through poetry, and eventually, when he moved to New York City to reunite with his father, he became an actor. So we have that high school teacher to thank for for James Earl Jones's contribution to stage and screen. Um, so just two more, this one and another one. Manistee, Michigan, James Earl Jones at 6. And this is in Mom Egg Review from this past spring of 2020. Manistee, Michigan. My cousins, uncles as young as me, call the place we are going Meat Skin as we ride north from Mississippi, laughter cloaking their uncertainty of what waits up north. I sit silent beside them, beginning the muteness I will carry the next 8 years before high school, before a poem pulls the sword of my voice from the stone of my stutter. Wear long sleeves, Papa's letter had said, but even with arms covered, the step from the train pebbles my skin. I shudder as much from the new as the cold. Can I trust these smiling white faces? Why does the air smell thinner? I follow my family from train to truck, cradle my knees, riding in the bed, crates and luggage bouncing on the unpaved road, wind muffling my cousins' exclamations as they pass new trees, arrive at the land coaxed from sandy to fertile by Papa, one of the grandparents I chose over my wandering mother, the father I will know much later. The grove that shades the new house offers a place where I won't intrude. If I'm out of the way, they might not make me leave. I play alone for hours under the elms and maples, speak only to the cars I make from sticks and wooden spools, create roads on which they drive. My voice glides in the easy shade, doesn't hitch or sputter like in Sunday school, where psalms and verses, plosives and hard consonants catch in my throat, while behind me children succumb to fits of quiet giggles and whispered imitations. But my cars and the livestock I talked to offer no judgment. Never tell me, say it again. Say it louder. Say it smoother in this new, lonely place. And last poem, thank you, from Fledgling Rag, wonderful journal that Lee Hinton produces out of or near Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And this is a DC poem. It's a local poem. It's a poem of hope. As I said before, I wanted to read something hopeful. So every April, one of the things that I missed during COVID, during the shutdown last year, was driving to work through Rock Creek Park, because around mid-April, there's this brilliant green that comes through as the trees begin to get their leaves. And on a cloudy day, it's almost neon. And I've been, I've been driving, I've been teaching for a while, and I've been driving that route for a while. And so I tried to capture that green here. This is called verdure, not verdure. And thank you again, Henry. Thank you, Anne. I can't wait to hear Hiram's poetry. And thank you again to the audience for being here. Verdure, not verdure. This green is frost's gold, held more than an hour. It eases the April morning slogs, late school year teacher exhaustion. Lighter than ripe limes, darker than golden delicious, it holds the sun, lets through enough to coat the next leaf in something indescribable, even by words like verdant, like glowing. It is a cloud of a color, makes you think if touched, the leaf might disappear, might transfer the color to your hand where it would climb your arm, make a scientist measure your gamma levels. Spectral green, a green jealousy envies, a green that makes salamanders skitter under rocks, a green that makes the Hulk shrink back to Bruce Banner, weep at its beauty. It's begging for a language that might make a blind man blush. Thank you very much.
It's the sound of two fingers clicking. Uh, Thank you very much, Hayes. I put in the chat again the opportunities to purchase the poet's books and to also check out our website at Cafe Muse for any future events. Okay, Hiram LaRue is the author of multiple books of poetry and is a multiple Pushcart nominee. But what distinguishes him most in my mind is his tireless work on behalf of the poetry community here in the DC area. He's an activist and the founder of Poetry X Hunger, which works on global hunger issues. He's a collaborator with the Right Blend Poetry Collective and appears regularly in support of area poetry events. So I'm going to leave it just there and let him and turn it over to Hiram for his poetry. And with that said, let's bring Hiram LaRue up to the PvP Zoom stage. Hiram, have at it.
Thank you so much, Henry. I want to thank you and Karen Alanier and the rest of the Cafe Muse Poets versus Pandemic team for hosting us. And I really want to thank and congratulate, big congratulations to Anne Harding Woodworth on the publication of her newest collection, Trouble. I'm also honored to be reading with her and with Hayes Davis. Just wonderful work we've heard this evening. And hey, a very special thanks to all of you folks for coming to this reading on this historically good inauguration day. This is an international reading. A special welcome to Mike Durack from Ireland. Mike, it's terrific to have you on here, particularly since we know it's, I think, past midnight your time. I've posted a couple of messages in the chat room. One you'll need to scroll back up to fairly far up the roster. It's called for poets who would like to speak back to hunger. Send any kind of poem about hunger that you would care to write to the address mentioned there, and we'll consider it for posting on the Poetry X Hunger website, where there are now about 250 poems that are being by poets from all over the world that are being used by anti-hunger groups as they speak back to hunger. And then I just posted a note about upcoming performances during February's Black History Month of Voices of Woodlawn, a program of poetry about America's history of slavery. So if you're at all inclined and interested in that very powerful program, email me and I'll be glad to send you more information. The first poem I'd like to read, one of the ways I express today's joy is in love poems. This poem is a love poem to a meadow. It's titled Life with a Candle. I want to marry this field truly and simply, with its wings curving the corners and its smoothness stunning my knees. All of my heart is here, far around me, and there's humming and leaning, even the trifling breeze. I want this field for my living, to vow to its edges that nothing comes true without greening. Nothing seems as bold as my longings except sloping. Nothing wakes on my shoulder but such rustling. I hope the strangest hopes in this field ever bending. From here, I know that this much of my all is clear. Before there were hills or even eyes to up over, there was a distance beyond us, a long, far away that can never come near. There was wishing. I want to carry this field in my arms by its being to a maybe that's certain. So our future can flicker on grasses and our children will wave from the clouds. The next piece is a look back in wonder with love and gratitude to grandmothers, all grandmothers. Johnny Chapman was also known as Johnny Appleseed. He lived from 1774 to 1845, and he's attained near fable status as a planter of apple seeds over much of the northern US in the early 1800s. This piece appeared in West Trade Review not too long ago. It's titled Losing Birthdays. One of my grandmothers grew deep red geraniums on her front porch for everyone strolling by in summer to admire. My other grandmother trained a rose bush of palest pinks and heavenly scent up over her back door. I was lost. And now there is how this field of sunrise forgets such birthdays, while blackbirds pick and ticks climb up. What good am I at taking such things inside, these deepest loves and smallest sounds? And I'm told that wherever he went, my imaginary uncle caused people to halfway grin. He was strange, so they say, but people loved him anyway for his dreamy ways. He seemed just like Johnny Appleseed, who, I still believe, dropped barefoot seeds on every spot that could be found, poor or steep, from now to then. And this piece is read in loving respect, read with loving respect in another voice. It's titled Smart Dumb. She was born inside out, the size of a heavy orange. And the story goes that she was wobbly from the very start. Even as a little girl, she was so smart and so damn dumb together. That's the way sometimes. Well, wouldn't you know it? Dad solved the problem. The full story isn't important, but what is that at about 19 or so, she fell jaw drop in love with someone who just wouldn't, couldn't, and didn't. Someone like too close to a fire. Yes, with those kind of eyes. And the thing was, there was no warning her at all. Not any. The rumors were rich enough to live on. But here's the thing, really. She ended up like a tree toppled over with roots up in the air. Hers was a big, sideways life that just never really got started. And of course, she's gone now, but wholly famous. That's what starting out with too many wants will do in an all or nothing sort of way. So the lingering question is this. Is it truly best to leave nature alone or invite it in for a chat over dinner? And the next to last piece is just a giddy gasp of amazement written from a porch that looks out onto a field. It's titled In Waiting. When I speak twig above me, the sounds are unimaginable. Each swollen bud laces its shoes, and those earwigs, their pinches, squeak out to my growing gold days. They grab my damp hearts in waiting. And when I see such tremendous shake salting importance on bird tails, or feel the will that won't, that matters, it's then from rooftops atop me that sudden notions wing me towards how to live. When I turn into twigs now, my sap dives deeper, and the claps clap louder up in those winking drip diamond wisely eaves. And the last piece is titled, well, the last piece is about the power, the power of advice. It's titled, Don't Tell Anyone. The hardest thing to do is keep or stay. When most of what we do sneaks out away or turns cousinish on us. Largely put, ours isn't ours ever. It couldn't be. We need to learn to haven't, to pine for never, to unlove love, to trust the weather. Thanks so much, Henry and Karen, Anne and Hayes, and everyone else for being here this evening.
Thank you. And let's hear it for all of these poets there, Anne Harding Woodward, Hayes Davis, and Hiram LaRue. Let's give them all clapping, whatever emojis, anything you got there on your screen that you want to get at these guys. We only have a few minutes, but I have a question. I would, if you guys would unmute yourselves, I have a good question for you that we can. You guys were all, the thing that really impressed me tonight is you're all three masters of capturing other people's voices and using voice in your work. My question is simply, where do these voices come from? And when you're writing the poems, do you sound them out in your revision, in your writing? And I'm going to start with Anne. Where do they come from, and how do you deal with them?
I don't know where any of this comes from. You know, and we all know that it just kind of happens, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. But when I was writing Hannah, she became so real to me. that it made it very simple to get into her body. And that's why I did turn it into a play, because I knew it was a one-woman show that I wanted to see on the stage. But where it comes from, you just keep your eyes and ears open, and you see something that you wonder. I mean, I keep wondering, like today, I was wondering what the insurgents who went into the Capitol building, were they listening to Obama's speech? I mean, sorry, were they listening to Biden's speech? Because I really wondered, and I began thinking like them, what would they think of that? And I, wrote a few notes to myself. Maybe I can be one of them.
Amazing, amazing. Hayes, now, how do you deal with that, bringing these voices in? I know some of your poems, you're just a master at doing this.
Thank you. That's such a good question. And I think what I want to say is that they come when I'm not looking. When I described going to VCCA, to the retreat, I went there wanting to write some stuttering poems. But the notion of my stutter as a persona didn't hit me until I was reading, again, I'll put the name of the book in the chat. It's called Blood Dazzler by Patricia Smith. And so the voices come, the best things I have found in life come to me when I'm not looking for them. When I met Terry, I wasn't looking for a relationship. When just so many different things. And so I think when I'm quiet and listening is when I'd say the voices come.
Yeah, it's that surprise. It's that surprise when you're not looking. I love it. Hiram, how about you? Where do they come from, and how do you deal with these voices? That last one was just the penultimate one was just loaded with voice.
Yeah.
Well, in case you can't see them, I have very large ears, and so I guess I just listen in surround sound. And I also grew up in Central Virginia, where there are all kinds of crossroading accents, a lot of soft Southern, but also a lot of Northern. And so I think just kind of enjoying, loving those sorts of expressions, and they come back to haunt me, is how I pick them up and try to sometimes incorporate them into pieces. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have three masters of voice. Again, let's give a good virtual applause to all three of our poets. And it looks like the witching hour is coming upon us now. So in closing, I hope you enjoyed this evening's readers, and will extend your enjoyment by purchasing the books and letting others know about our series. And I'll put those links one more time into the chat. So come back on February 1, 2021, when Cafe Muse Online will be featuring poets Lindsay Lusby and Charlotte Matthews. And we'll be back here again on PvP on February 17, 2021 with Grace Cavalieri, reading from her new book, What the Psychic Said. So I'm going to put those links back into the chat and say goodnight to everybody. And it's a happier day in Washington. It's, I think, a happier day in this country and a happier day for the world. So good night and stay safe.